of years you've been doing a lot of music. And I mean, when was that picture taken? That's
yeah, it was probably like 5 or 6 years old.
Okay. And you're already interested into music then?
Right. I'm coming from a musical family. My family is musical background. My grandma was a piano teacher. My mom did teach the piano. My aunt, so a lot of piano teaching. And they tried to do the same with me, and I did it for about 2 years. But my grandma, that tried to teach me, was very old school. She was kind of the one to stick. Not really, but I mean it was pretty grueling. And so after 2 years, I said I give up. I don't want to play any old stuff anymore. I want to play something new or invent my own music. And I was also into electronic music. And the first music that I heard, the first electronic piece was the popcorn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So it was mid-70s, and I thought, how did they do that? From having just a piano at home, I didn't know how to make the sounds, and I wanted to do something like that. So my early childhood dream was to own a synthesizer, but they were super expensive, and my parents weren't rich, so I couldn't afford one. And so it had to be a dream for a while. I was then doing some electronics, building some stuff myself, a little electronics kit. And I built my own little synthesizer, but very small. And I couldn't do much, but it was fun. I was just
Do you still have that?
No. No, yeah, if I had known, I would have kept that too. But I have kept stuff from that era. I acquired a used electronic organ. So it was one of those huge things with 1,000 knobs and stuff like that. And it still didn't sound like a synthesizer. So I actually started to do some circuit bending. I did new connections inside, and eventually I killed it. But I still have actually recordings from that time. Yeah. So the first organ piece. So this was not circuit. So that's solo.
Still running the business.
There was no sequence in it. This was just like me playing into a little tape recorder, and but I preserved it all. So that's something I'm going to talk about later too. So then, the Commodore 64 came into my life. It was like, so I had a stream of owning a synthesizer, but I couldn't afford one. And then I read in a magazine about the specs of the Commodore 64. And a friend of mine had a VC20, the older one, and the sound chip was pretty bad. So I read the new sound chip had was like a real synthesizer with waveforms and filters and all that stuff. And I thought, wow, I have to have that. And I was into video games, I was playing on the arcade machines, spent a lot of money there, and then I had an Atari VCS, the Atari with the modules and stuff like that. But I also wanted a system where I could play games on. So I saved up some money and I went to the store, and I was about 50 or 100 Deutschmarks short of the machine, and I almost bought an Atari 400 because I could afford it. And then my grandma, she saw my eyes, ordering the Commodore 64, and she said, "Oh, you can't decide." And I said, "Oh, I really want this Commodore 64, but I can't afford it," so she helped me out. Yes. So I brought it home, and for the first year I was playing games.
good start. I mean,
Right.
almost to start.
Right, and but during that time playing games, I became interested in how do you make a game? So I started programming, you know, first in BASIC, and then I did my own sprites and stuff like that. I tried to make a game, and it basically didn't work, so I learned assembly language. So that I could really towards the process and everything. And so I did some early games, but to be honest, I'm not a great games programmer. A friend of mine actually was much better. That he had already sold one game to a company, and but he wasn't good in music. So finally, you know, I did some music examples, and he said, "Hey, why don't you make music for my new game?" And so I did that. That game, unfortunately, when I did this was in 1985. But the game actually didn't come out until I was already working for Rainbow Arts later. So yeah, so it took a while for it to finish and stuff. But my first game music ever is here, and it's also preserved. It's called Planet of War. And so this was the first time I made really music on the Commodore 64.
That was only code. You didn't do an editor for it, or you just...
Exactly. So it was all like the code in assembly language, and then the nodes I hacked them with a machine, I mean a monitor program. Just like hex numbers. Good. We've come a long way from that. So, and yeah, shortly after that, there was this music competition in a magazine, a 64 magazine in Germany. Pretty well known, and the competition for music was the Commodore 64 programmed. And I sat down, and within 3 months I rewrote everything, you know, the player that plays the notes. Still no editor, still typing it in. With, there's a funny story there. The competition ended on a Friday. That was the deadline to send it in. And I didn't have a song until Thursday night. Okay. I started Thursday night in the evening after I did my homework and stuff like that for school. I started hacking in the song. And I think I was finished at 4 in the morning.
Sounds like should be deadline pressure. You know?
So I slept for like 3 hours, got up for school. And I told my parents, you have to put this disc in the mail. I gave them the envelope and everything. And you have to put that in, because if this doesn't go out today, then I will not be part of this thing. And so they did, yeah. They sent it out. If they hadn't sent it out, then there would be no competition.
So that was close call on shades. So you basically did the shades tracking in one evening.
Basically, yeah. I mean, I had the, while I was creating the playback routine, I already did some experiments with some, you know, basic melodies and sounds and stuff like that, but I hadn't really fleshed out the song.
Okay.
And
so basically, like what Sergi said today, quick decisions is what you need to do in music. You were forced to that. Do you have any example?
yeah, I have a little example here.
There were in the competition?
They must have had about 30, 40 pieces,
okay.
And they whittled it down to like 10 or 15 that got part of the cover disc. And that was all I wanted.
Okay, to get
originally.
there.
So yeah, to get onto the cover disc. And then they called me a week later and they said I won it. And I was like I couldn't believe it what I was hearing on the phone, and then you know once I got off the phone, I was jumping around, and my parents didn't know what was going on. They thought like somebody died or whatever. I don't know.
Teacher.
Yeah, so it was really crazy, and so then I was in contact with that editor from the magazine quite a bit because he was my first fan,
Okay.
and we talked every couple of days, and he wanted to know how I did this, and he was into music too, but he couldn't understand how I put in the notes and everything, and I told him on the phone, you know what, I've been thinking about this. There's probably an easier way to do this kind of stuff. We need like a tool that can make it easier to input the sounds for this stuff. So that's where the idea for the sound monitor was born. And I told him about it, and he was so excited. He said, if you make this thing, it's going to become like the listing of the month, and you know, like another feature and stuff like that. So I sat down over the summer of '86, and I put this tool together, and it looks like this. So essentially, this was long before there were trackers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the basics are already there. You know, you have like you still work kind of with hex numbers, but you have a
Transpose and sound.
yeah, things like that makes it easier to create music. And there's
The
also-
BE00 is actually the address in the memory, right?
Right, exactly. It's still the address. It's closer to a monitor than the tracker was, but it had also this pattern editor, which looks very much still like a tracker looks today. So the only difference is there's not 4 tracks that run from top to bottom. It's essentially one pattern is one voice, and it runs from the left side top to the right side bottom. So you read it like a book. And then you would like put the patterns together here in the 3 tracks. So, but yeah, so this is basically like the grandfather of all trackers, if you will. And I did a lot of music pieces with that, and then I got hired by Rainbow Arts. That was my next step in the career. I called them up, I told them about the contest and about the sound tool. So they hired me for some projects, first as a freelance composer, and then they offered me an in-house job. And so I joined them and spent there like 5 years and did all the music for them. And
So that's not a bad start of a career as well. Like, hey, I won this competition in the magazine. So
right,
you wanna
that
hire
helped
me?
a lot. Yeah.
That's really good.
And also, I mean, at the time they were really, I mean, you have so many talented people now in the scene and the industry or whatever, but back then, programming, which was still more programming than composing, you know. So there were essentially like, I knew maybe 5 or 6 people who did this, and then a couple of hobbyists, and I don't know how many there were, even maybe like a dozen.
Yeah, there weren't that many, but did you have any contact with the other composers as well?
Not really,
Okay.
to be honest. For a long time, I think I met Rob Hubbard finally in 2001 or so. Yeah?
That's a bit later.
That was about when he was about to retire. So, yeah.
What, sorry? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah, you used it.
of course.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you did? Wow.
Yeah, I've actually used it. I've done a couple of my 64 tracks on that as well. So.
Awesome.
But then you moved on to you did a rock monitor as well. Was that?
Well, that was actually that was a scene hack.
Okay.
But I did do samples,
Yeah.
which was my trick that I figured out while playing with digi drums.
Yeah.
And I realized that while I had digi drums open, it was I don't know, it was a commercial thing, but you could make the drum patterns with samples.
Yeah.
And I could actually switch on the voice of the SID chip, and I would still hear it. I thought they did the drum somehow was utilizing the whole SID chip, but they didn't. So I figured out, okay, there must be a way. So I tried some things, and that was the volume register. It worked like a 4-bit, digital to audio converter.
Yeah.
And so I built a little hardware with a friend to sample in 4-bit samples into the Commodore 64. And I sat there and sampled all kinds of stuff. And so I made this like fourth voice, and this was during my time at Rainbow Arts, the first year, '87. And I had this all ready, and I was like so excited to put that out. And their games were not ready, and I wasn't the guy who was just like give it out as a demo, or I didn't have the connections even.
Yeah.
So I was waiting for the first game to be finished that could use that, and that was Jinx.
Oh yeah.
And it didn't. It was delayed, and it didn't come out until the late fall. And a couple of weeks before we released it, Arcanoid came out.
Oh yeah, with samples
And
there
Martin
as well.
Galway had a similar system. It wasn't quite as playing back full samples. It was more like almost like generated waveforms in like 256 bytes.
Mhm.
And they made these clicky sounds that sounded a little bit like digidrums.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he kind of got the first credit, and I was a little bit pissed about that, but now I'm laughing about it. So, but Jinx, I have a little example here. Where is it? There. That was the girlfriend of the boss. Said that sample.
Quite a lot when people used it one later on as well.
Yeah,
so.
they were like ripped all over the place. Yeah. And I mean, I didn't create those samples. They came from some commercial recordings where there was like a drum solo, and I just sampled it. And nobody knows what it even was. It was probably a lot of Italo disco.
Yeah.
Sorry to admit that, but besides some more sophisticated electronics like Tangerine Dream and Vangelis, I also listen to Italo disco. So yeah, then what else? I did a follow-up on the sound monitor that was called TFMX.
Yes. You did that on the 64 as well, or?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that looked like, and I didn't release that. That was just internally, and it's got its own memory management, so you don't have to put in addresses anymore. But it's still got like the pattern editor is very similar. It was more efficient, and it had something that I called, I called it here arpeggio, but it really was the precursor, what I later called the sound macro, which was like a little kind of scripting language that would be triggered with each note. And in that scripting language, you could define like, you could on every change of the of one frame, you could change all registers of the SID chip if you wanted to. So that enabled me to do some really crazy sounds that weren't possible with the sound monitor. And in fact, when they changed the SID chip in a later edition, the sampling playback wasn't, you couldn't use that trick anymore the way it was programmed. So I actually, and the games also needed more CPU, so we went back to doing everything just with the SID chip. But this helped to bridge that gap and make the sound great. And you could also do things like totally combining like a hi-hat or bass drum, snare drum with a bass sound just behind it, and you wouldn't realize that they were playing one after another. It was kind of all together. And the one of the final pieces I did there for the Commodore 64 was the R-Type C64 theme, and that kind of showcases what you can do with the sound macros. So. Hard to believe that that's three voices.
Yeah, it sounds very full, so the macro works.
Yeah, so then I moved to the Amiga, and I did the same kind of system on the Amiga, but so it was also called TFMX, but it was quite a bit different system.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I saw it on the Amiga, I was like, yeah. And then I tried that back to live sample that you had there as well. Just
Right. And I don't know if I might not have a screenshot of that actually. I wish I had it here, but it's not there. Anyway, so yeah, so then I started also with like some orchestral sounds. I had in the meantime acquired some synthesizers. One was the ESQ1 from Ensoniq, and the other one was the Korg M1 workstation, which was like a sample synthesizer, and it had some pretty decent orchestral sounds built in. So the next well-known piece is probably the R-Type on the Amiga, which was different from the Commodore 64 because I figured if I just do the same song on the Amiga, it won't have the same impact because it can do sampling, and that was something different, so you wouldn't use the exact same song. And so I did something that is a little bit more orchestral. I mean, it still sounds very electronic, but that got quite some good feedback. And this is still four voices in it.
I have one complaint with this track, is the highest pitch note cracks a bit.
Yeah.
That's the limitation on the Amiga. It's a beautiful track.
And so on.
Yeah. And those samples were ripped in many tunes and used in many tunes after the trackers as well.
Right, or maybe other people had that one and they could do similar sounds. I mean, that was a very popular machine.
Yeah.
But to jump ahead a little bit, we're coming back to the Amiga days, but jumping to almost present time, 2 years ago I was actually asked to do a title track, a short title track for the iPhone version of R-Type. And so I did it's only like 45 seconds because they did have memory limitations and they couldn't play like a tracker file or anything. So it was like straight MP3, but they wanted to keep their app small enough. And also I didn't want to just rehash the old stuff. So I came up with something a little bit more modern, like a take, but just to get an idea what that sounds like.
It's a R-Type connection. Yes?
I don't know if this has been asked before, I was a little late. When you were doing the music on the C64 and you had to program it, did you first try it out on the piano and write down the music score? Or did you have it in the memory?
Well, it depended. Like for example, Shades. That first piece I really did, totally just programming it and not playing in advance. But later, when I developed music like the R-Type theme on the Amiga and stuff like that, I did have keyboards, In fact, here's like, this was the first one that I had, the Ensoniq SQ1. And then the M1. And I used to play the melodies then first on the piano keyboard. So.
Here on the Amiga, the harmonies were a little more sophisticated.
Right. No, I definitely during those times I did play a lot on the keyboard. I was jamming, and this is another under my tips and tricks or advice is record everything you ever do, even if it's just playing on the piano or on your keyboard or whatever. Let tape run, or record it somehow in the background, because you never know what is in there, what you're just jamming. You might have forgotten it 5 minutes later, and so I have all these tapes that I then also later transferred digitally, and I still have them all. So that helps. And the R-Type theme was just one of those jam sessions, and I had it there on tape, and then I selected it and fleshed it out and made it better and stuff like that. So that's how I work. And to this day, I always do that, recording in the background. In fact, Cubase has this function when you play something and the sequence is not even running, or maybe even if it's running, it records all the MIDI notes in the background. It's called retroactive recording. And there's like a shortcut that you can use to paste it into your file.
So you can jam wherever you want it.
Exactly, yeah. So I use that. And so then the Amiga stuff was advancing. Obviously Turrican, like
the little game we've heard of occasionally. So.
Yeah. So there, the really interesting thing was the 7-voice program or routine. And I had a little bit of help by an Atari ST guy that I'd like to mention, Jochen Hippel. So he implemented an emulation of what the Amiga sound chip does on the Atari ST. And so he played 4 voices like the Amiga did. So he actually converted a lot of my tunes for Rainbow Arts games to the Atari ST. And so he had kind of like almost a full emulation of my whole TFMX thing. And one day I asked him if he could maybe show me his source code and share it. And so I reworked it so that it would run on the Amiga actually.
Okay.
And do the same thing. Exactly, but the trick was I had seen some other programming examples that mixed always 2 channels into one. So like the Octamate came out later, or Octalizer, I don't know what they were called. But the downside of that was you lose fidelity.
Yes, quite a lot.
Each time you mix something down, you lose the high end, and like crispy sounds on bells and stuff like that. That wouldn't sound good on the system. So my idea was to just take the 4-voice emulation from the Atari ST and mix it down to 1 voice of the Amiga, and then have 3 voices still left original.
Yeah.
And that's what I did for Turrican 2. And that's why you have all these like crisp bell type sounds in there, but you also have like drum sounds and bass sounds all mixed down on that 1 voice. And so you have 7 in total.
And that confused the hell out of me, I must say. When I got it, I just sat near my speakers like 1, 2, hey, that's more than 4. What to do? How to do?
Yeah, in fact, I composed the song in a way to show off that it's more.
Of course.
So let me see here. I only have something short here, I think. Well, actually, let's just use it from the original recording here. So you hear in the beginning, it's 1 voice. 3, 4, 5, another. Yes. Start stopping. So that whole intro was just to show off. A little bit of the old melody. recreate that.
You use the chords like we others had to use arpeggios. I mean, just to
Yeah, or like sample them.
Yeah.
The freedom with that 7 voice was that I could really like use any chord I wanted without having to sample it into memory.
Yes.
So that was probably pretty much the pinnacle of Amiga stuff that I did, and then I basically moved on to console stuff like Super Nintendo and Sega Mega Drive and things like that. And of course, it was like a lot of Tarakan in those days, so there were several. And here's maybe an interesting little thing. There was a kind of proto version of the Super Tarakan 2, some Super Tarakan 2 piece. I don't know which one it was exactly, but oh, there's even an earlier version. This is already the better one. Let me see. Yeah, this was actually done on the just on the ESP1 with the internal sequencer of that machine.
Okay.
And this is one example. Like that recording was made like years earlier. I mean that was probably made in 1987.
Okay.
But I reused it in 1992 or so when we did Super Tarakan 2.
Did you adapt TFMX to on those platforms as well, or did you write those drivers?
Yes. For a long time I did Super Nintendo and Mega Drive and all those things. I did still on the Amiga computer with emulation and stuff like that, and we had a little hardware that would stick next onto the slot on the Amiga that had an FM sound chip. So we could simulate what the Sega Mega Drive does and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, it was a lot of hacking and programming and hardware and stuff like that in those days.
And the Super Nintendo had 7 voices as well, right?
It had actually 8, but it worked out fine because I usually reserved one channel for sound effects exclusively, and then some others. I also had like this priority system where the sound effects would steal voices from the music if necessary. But basically, like I composed in 7 voices for the Super Nintendo. Yeah. And so where are we in the list of things here?
I'll look on the cheat sheet here if I have it. Well, you have a lot of stuff to talk about, so.
Right.
But when did you move over to the US, by the way?
Right. That's essentially the next thing. So, in the mid-90s, the game development in Germany really got pretty shitty. There was not much going on, and all the happening games were either US, UK, or Japan. And my friends from Factor 5, some people here still expect the 5, they moved to the US in '96 and started working with LucasArts on games. And so they got finally the chance to work on a Star Wars game on the Nintendo 64. And that system didn't have a CD drive. It had a cartridge, and so it was basically like the old days. You had more voices, but you still had memory limitations, and it needed to be sequenced with samples. And being Star Wars, I'm a huge John Williams fan, and Star Wars, also I love the movies. At least the old ones. So I was excited. They asked me if I would join the team for a while, like a year maybe, and work on this. And work my magic on the Nintendo 64 and try to make something that at least resembles like an orchestral music piece. And yeah, I mean for the limitations there, I think we got a pretty good result. Do I have that here? Oh yeah. Here's the theme music, and this is all samples.
Memory did you get for samples for this?
I had about 1 megabyte before the compression. They would they compressed it to something like a quarter, I think. This is 80 PCM compression or something like that. Yeah. So on the cartridge it was 256 kilobytes.
That's a bit. Just cramming in an orchestra into that.
Yeah.
So. And how many Star Wars titles did you work on?
We did 4 with Battle for Naboo, which was take on the new or the prequels, and with the last one we actually started to record real orchestra, and there was supposed to be another one and we never released that for various reasons, and we had actually recorded it with a real orchestra.
Okay. Which orchestra did you use?
That was in Bratislava in Slovak Republic.
Okay. Too bad. Yes?
During all the time that you did game audio, how aware were you of the demo scene and what they did?
Yeah, no, I became aware of the demo scene in about end of the 80s, and I've always listened to like demos that I found or saw. But as I said, I was never at a party or anything, and I don't know many people from the scene, except now.
Yeah, that's good. It's
like this guy Xerxes, I actually found him through Digitally Imported.
Okay.
Which
I was meeting him in the hallway after you went here yesterday, and I said, well, Chris wanted to see your seminar. He's like, okay, I'm going home. So that's all good. No?
Yeah.
But about time then, your first demo party in 2012, just when the world is about to end.
Yeah, right. I don't think so. But yeah, so essentially after the first Star Wars game went well, and I really liked it over there, I stayed actually, or I got the chance to stay.
Yeah.
And I've been there ever since, 14 and a half years now. Yeah.
On the West Coast.
Yes.
Enjoying it.
Yes. I found my wife there, and I financing a little house. And now I work as a freelance actually again, because Factor 5 USA had to close. And so now I'm doing a lot of things, including the
Tarkin, yes, the Tarkin soundtrack and Talbot.
Yeah, that was quite surprising, this whole thing. How many people here pledged for that project?
Yeah, I did as well.
Okay. Right, yeah.
So it was a bit of a surprise to get.
It was really a surprise. So I had this idea last year when a friend of mine did his album on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And I thought for a while, the 20th anniversary was coming up for that original album that I did in '93, and I always had the wish to, revisit that, because the games had so many pieces and the CD was so small, so there was never a complete edition or anything, and that was where the idea came. Okay, I can't finance a thing like that by myself, so all of a sudden this Kickstarter thing is a possibility to get something like that made. So I calculated it, and I thought I need at least 3 CDs and a budget of $75,000 US. And I thought, oh my, am I doing the right thing here? Maybe in the end I get only 5,000. and it will be very embarrassing. But it worked out.
Worked out well.
More than double, and now we extended the package with 4 CD, and we'll do some video documentary going along and some other things. So it's quite a project. So, and I'm working on that pretty much full time right now. And yeah, I mean, I have a little example here, which I released for the exclusive $100 plus backers, but now you all can hear it.
You'll hear it for free.
Yes, and it's a comparison of the first level tune from Turrican 1 between the Amiga, the new version, how it sounds like, the 1 CD version from '91, and then back to the new piece. That's Amiga. So you can get a little bit of an idea what that will sound like for all 80 pieces that I have to make. So it's a little bit crazy.
But how are you doing this? Are you going through your old TFMX tracks and looking it up, or?
Yeah, in fact, I still have all my data from the Amiga, but I don't have a functioning Amiga over in the US. So I use an emulator, the UAE or Amiga Forever. And I first had trouble running it actually because it's now so fast on a modern PC that the editor is such a shitty program, and I'm not totally responsible for that. That when you press on like changing the songs, it jumps like 20 steps ahead because you can't like go by one and stuff like that. So I had to figure out something, and finally I found an option to switch the processor speed to Amiga 500. And then I finally got it all running, and so now I can actually look up some patterns and notes that I used and things like that, just to be more accurate with my, to make it even more like the old one. And update all the sounds, and I use obviously the same sound generators to create the new samples and enhance them a little bit, do like drums where they were not, and some stuff like that.
Oh, you have some work to do.
Yes, absolutely. And then that music box that was like that thing. I mean, you will see that in the video documentary. We were documenting that stuff. That music box was quite some work to get done. You know, there are certain things that reminded me a little bit of programming on the Commodore 64 with the limitations.
With the music box.
What you can't do on the music box and what you can do, there's some crazy stuff, but I had some good people helping me with it that do the stuff for decades already.
Excellent. And it will play the Great Bath? Or?
Yes.
Ah, excellent. Good music box thing that is.
Yeah.
But you've also done work on a different Amiga original, well, C64 Amiga project now, the Gianna Sisters thing?
Oh yeah, there's a resurrection of Gianna Sisters, good that you mentioned it. They're also running a Kickstarter right now, so check it out. It's got an absolute amazing graphics system. I don't know how they've done it, but the world transforms from like good to evil all the time on the push of a button.
Okay.
And we're trying to do a similar thing with the music, where we have like two versions of a track. One is like more like a cutesy version, and the other one is actually Machina Supremacy.
Yes, that's
from
rocking.
Sweden, which is very exciting that they're on board with that project. And so yeah, that has been going on for a while, and they're almost on the finish line if you watch that video on Kickstarter. I didn't need a little bit more boost to get it out.
And you did the cute versions of the tracks?
Yeah,
mostly,
yeah. And then the general melodies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still my compositions.
Yes, of course. And did Machina do anything to their old track as well, and they did some new stuff with this, or?
They're doing new stuff.
Ah, excellent. It's going to be interesting too. See, apart from that, you're doing new work on mobile phones and all that
I've
stuff.
done quite a number of iPhone games, and
You killed my thumb with the zombie smash thing, because just
Right.
throwing zombies away is crazy.
yeah, that was actually very successful, that game. That's I think they're now acquired by Zynga, or they sold like 1.5 million copies.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
I wish I had a share of that. But yeah, so Zombie Smash theme here. And I wanted it kind of retro. It was supposed to sound a little bit like a John Carpenter soundtrack from the 80s. A little bit like
Carpenterish, I must say. And it fits the theme of the game as well. So.
Yeah. And here's a lesser known game, but I thought it was fun to work on. This is kind of a little bit, it's not a Tetris clone per se, but it has the look of Tetris a little bit. And this is called GeoDrop.
It's also for iOS.
Yeah, and I think this in-game is pretty fun, just kind of a little bit different.
just rehashing all
Right.
the like now.
Right. Yeah.
That's good. So what are your plans apart from, I mean, yes, you have a gazillion Turrican tracks to do, and when do you plan to be finished by that? With that?
The thing is, I mean, now that we expanded it to 4 CDs,
Yeah.
I don't think Christmas is realistic. But
Okay.
I'm pushing as hard as I can, but it's probably going to be, spring.
Yeah, and you also have an orchestral thing to connect to
Right,
this.
that's in November actually here, and unfortunately they released so little tickets. I didn't even get additional ones for my friends and family.
Oh.
But they're planning to broadcast it on the radio.
Oh yeah,
So
also web
it's a
stream.
concert with all kinds of game music. East meets West, it's called, and it's gonna happen on November 16th in the Funkhaus.
Yeah, I was there at the Symphonic Shades, yes. Really nice.
Yeah.
Good orchestra as well.
So maybe we should wrap it up and have some questions answered.
Anyone? Feel free
Yeah, I
to.
got a question about Monkey Island, because you were working on the soundtrack and the Amiga version was better than the PC ones. Because PC version was EGA, I think, back in the days. It was using FM Adlib.
Right.
And later you got a CD version on PC with 256 cores and the real soundtrack. So Michael Land was copying you, or?
Well, I think they produced it in the studio first, so they already had better versions, but they had to, convert it to the Adlib sound card. But they did have an MT32, which was the super expensive high-end sound card, which was basically the precursor of real General MIDI. I think the Roland sound canvas is the same system, and but I'm telling you that soundtrack drove me nuts because they had written it in MIDI without it was not quantized on anything. It was played freely, and to put that into TFMX in that sequence system was very difficult. But I was also, of course, I was driven to deliver something special on the Amiga and to show how it could be done or how it could sound, and that's how I did. But I remember it was quite tough to do.
And you were working with Rudolf Stember, or how you?
Yeah, we became friends in '89, around that time, and we worked together on a bunch of titles. And he still lives in the US too. Yeah, I'm still in contact with him. He's actually doing some of the video work for the soundtrack anthology.
What kind of tools and hardware are you using nowadays?
Yeah, so it's pretty much all virtual instruments nowadays. I had a big studio in the mid-90s with lots of modules, MIDI modules and synthesizers and big mixing desk and all this heavy, expensive stuff, and I sold it all. I mean, I still have some, but not as it was, because you can do everything in the computer again, just like in the old days on the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, but now you have more power and you can play all those sounds virtually. And I use Cubase as my main tracking workstation. And I use WaveLab to process wave files, and then some stuff here and there. But
Any particular VSTs, VSIs?
yeah, I mean, I luckily somebody emulated the ESQ1 SQ80, and I use that obviously. Then the M1 is perfectly done by Korg themselves, along with some other of their classic synths. I use those. I have the Native Instruments, the Ultimate Edition with all the plugins that they have. And for orchestral stuff, I use East-West, and some others. I mean, so countless. For a while, I was really collecting sounds like crazy, and then at some point, I had to stop and just say I have to use what I got, and not just collect more and more. It's crazy.
And that is sort of what you do in that little electronics TV show you do as well. You find tools and software.
Yeah, showcase them. Actually, that is a little bit on halt right now. We have one more episode that needs to be cut and delivered, but I use that. Actually, that show was kind of a test bed for me to get a little bit over my fear of public speaking. So this is like
This is working.
yeah. So
for those of you who haven't seen it, he's been doing a little electronics podcast, video podcast.
it's on YouTube. You find it under electronic music makers video podcast. That's the
Could be simple.
long name. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I didn't want anybody to find it.
No, it's good. It's good. Any more questions? Yes, over there.
You said like back in the old times there were like maybe 5 or 6 other people doing stuff. Nowadays, would you say that there's a lot of concurrency?
There's a lot of competition, yes.
So would you say it's sort of your fame that still keeps your contract going?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's really hard to actually break into the industry right now. You need really talent and a lot of, that's like one of my advices here, because people ask me, how do you get into the industry? And you need to be tenacious. You can't give up, It's going to take a long time until you get established, maybe years. So you probably have to work several jobs until you get there. But if you want it, you have to just keep doing it. And one thing is, don't send demos to companies. It's absolutely worthless. Because nobody has the time to look at it, or the people who could look at it and say something, they're usually musicians themselves, and they just hire their buddies or do it themselves. So it's very unlikely that you get discovered by sending in a demo somewhere. What you need to do is you need to go to trade shows and things like game developers conference and stuff like that, and hang out with the people who make the games and befriend them. And drink with the producers, have a good time, and you'll see. Then you'll get the jobs. But it's also tough. I mean, there's very talented people out there, and in fact, Hollywood has discovered games as a new way to do music. And it's like in Hollywood, you have that crazy thing where there's about 3,000 good composers. Only 300 of them can actually live off making music. The others have to job other things. And then only 30 get the big jobs, like Hans Zimmer and stuff like that. It's really crazy. So the other thing that you can do is you can work for an established composer. I mean, I don't want to say, come all to me. I don't have that much work to share, but there are people who need help, and if you can get them, to hire you for like some additional work or something, that's a good way to get a credit in the game. Maybe you have to work for free. In fact, here's the thing, don't undervalue your work, but if you have to start out, maybe work for somebody who's established for free. But if somebody asks you, what do you charge? Don't tell them, oh, I charge $50 for a minute, because that's not going to pay your life, and you will never earn more than that, ever. So you have to be as honest to yourself and to be confident to ask what's like an industry usual rate, which is probably between 500 and 1,500 a minute of finished music. Dollars, euros, wherever you are. I mean, it's not that much difference right now. And not shortchange yourself. If they don't ask for cheaper and cheaper, the only thing you can do is you could get percentages. If you think this is a really good game that will sell well, ask for a percentage. That way you could get your rate down maybe. Or decline and move on, because I mean, if they're so cheap, then they're not valuing good work either.
Any more questions? There we have one.
Yeah, what's your favorite demo?
Now I'm really starting to sweat.
Yes.
I can't really name it. I mean, what was that second reality from, what was that, 93 or whatever, I don't know. No, I don't really know. Maybe you show me some favorites later here.
There'll be some demos that are going. Yes?
If I remember well, did you do the music for To Be On Top as well?
Yeah.
So was this a special game for you?
Yeah, I actually did the concept and the most of the programming for the game. It was a little bit like an autobiography in the game. So you would play this guy who was trying to make it big in the...
You could mix and
Yeah, you had like, that was the new thing about the game, was that you were supposed to be able to put together your own song with just like pick and choose and...
So was this your idea or?
Yeah.
Yeah, your idea. And did you also do the code or just the music thing?
I did a lot of the graphics, I did a lot of the programming, and...
I actually haven't played that game, but I've heard the track a gazillion times. Any more questions?
We need to open some windows.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a question. Yes?
Compared to the old days, how much would you say the old ideas and the old way of doing things is influencing your work nowadays, today?
You mean like in terms of music? Or?
In terms of music, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a child of the 80s, you know, I mean, I grew up there, that was very influential with my melodies and stuff like that. I still, to this day, utilize some tricks that I learned in those early days with all the limitations. I still use them today sometimes. Yeah, so it was helpful to grow up in that time.
I was just asking who it was your idea to call the TFMX or...
Yeah, it was a stupid thing. I mean, you're young, you know, you come up with stupid ideas. So it was when I did TFM was the intermediate after Sound Monitor and was the final music system.
The final music.
The final music system. Yeah. So and then it wasn't. So I did an X for extended, the final music system. And it was not the last one by a long shot. So, but yeah, that was that. Yeah, and. Actually, to get back to your question earlier was the limitations. I mean, essentially what I did on the Commodore 64 was like having to deal with just 3 voices helped me to make the arrangement for the music box. Because there are like similar limitations that you can't use that many sounds at the same time or that many notes and stuff like that.
So it all
comes
back together.
Yeah, it worked. And actually the guys who know about it, they helped me, but they were amazed that I actually was able to accomplish what I told them what I wanted to do. And at first they said, can't be done.
Okay.
And then I thought, wait a second.
It's going to be interesting to hear.
Did it and
Anything else? Yes, in the back.
Were you involved in the Nintendo DS version of Genesis?
Only quality control. At the time I was full-time at Factor 5 and I had plenty to do. So I had actually a friend of mine do the music, but he did basically like mostly remixes of mine and then some additional music, and I worked with him as well on the new one, so yeah.
Because I think you were credited.
Yeah, no, I got my credit, yeah. But I didn't actually sit there and type in notes or or recorded anything.
Okay, I think that kind of sums it up. Now I think that you should enjoy the rest of the party actually watching the competitions because they will be great. And have a beer with the people.
Yeah, first I need to cool down.
Yes. That's wonderful. So thank you, Chris, for coming here.